Greetings. We are still doing this. I'm Ian.
I'm Steve.
And today on Down Below, we are going to tell you about the GM's role in feeding into the story.
Some of this might seem like simple and already known information to some of you. In that case, congratulations. Now spread that to others.
You see, one of the problems that we believe exists in the tabletop role-playing game community and industry is that there is a dearth of teaching GMs what they can and should be doing in GMing.
There are tons of great tools, and in fact, there are also some fantastic GM-less games out there. If you haven't checked out games such as Fiasco, go for it. They're fantastic. They really invest people, and they're good training tools for training a traditional DM. But there aren't that many tools. Back in the old days, it was almost a master-student relationship, kind of an apprenticeship, where a DM at the table would take a promising player under their wing until the player felt they were ready. And somewhere around the explosion of the late 80s, early 90s, that got muddied up, and a lot of people started up playing the game with no existing gaming group. And there really has never been tools developed to try to teach someone to be a good game master.
So how can we say, first, there's a bunch of tools, and then there's not a lot of tools? Well, it's not for lack of trying, mind you.
Right.
We are also trying to add to that space. So in our game, the GM is, as we alluded to in earlier videos, a planner. Mm-hmm. They are responsible for the setting, and they have the multiplicity of avatar to interact with the players through, of NPCs and everything in the setting.
Here is where we get into a thorny part. One very common pitfall of a new DM especially, but even some older DMs, is the DM avatar character, sometimes known as the DM player character, sometimes known as the signature NPC, the Gandalf factor, if you will. Here it's very tempting to have that happen. We have actually designed it in the game that it is impossible mechanically to have a DM player character.
Because the GM uses different rules than the players. The GM's rule to interact with the players is the challenge instead of the trait.
Now, that said, the reason I even bring this up when we've already made it so that the DM cannot have a player character avatar challenging for spotlight time is incredibly simple. And that is to prompt the DM to look at it from a different perspective from the player. This is the core problem that a lot of DMs in Dungeons & Dragons, if they're coming to it for the first time, face, because they will look at the adventure design and they will look at it from the perspective of a player, and that is, I won't say wrong, but that is so much more work for the DM to have to work around, because the DM needs that zoomed out multiplicity of viewpoint, needs that overview in order to interact with it.
To break it down to that single element, as I mentioned, the challenge is the GM's input, where the players have the traits on their character sheets and the actions that they take using those traits. Mm-hmm. The GM's job is to plan for challenges that the players can attempt those actions, to attempt to use those traits to overcome. So the GM needs to set up a course. They need to create an obstacle course of a story, of potential stories, and have in their toolbox all of these multiple possible hurdles to overcome or pitfalls to avoid, things that will make it enjoyable and meaningful for the players to have these traits, because they have the chance to use them to do things.
In many ways, the way we're designing it is going to be easier on the DM, because they simply have to think narratively, as opposed to a traditional role-playing game where to design an adventure for characters of level N, that means that you have to be prepared for modifiers of level N plus 1, and thus set difficulties starting at a scale of level N plus 3, with higher difficulties being N plus 5, and suddenly you're swimming in numbers and you've lost sight of what the narration is. Here, all you have to do is think about the narration and challenge the players to overcome it themselves, since the players have the tool of, these are the successes I have available.
So for a final note, we do still have one element of numbers, the successes they have available.
Yep.
Although we recommend not having that number grow per character, you will, of course, have to remember your N as number of players and plan for N times 11 approximately in how many challenges the players will be able to potentially succeed at in a session if everything lines up so that their traits apply.
And a very important note that we have actually not touched on before at all, but I'm going to drop this bomb at the end of this video here.
So that we can touch on it further next time.
If you have a large group and a small playtime, reduce the number of traits available accordingly. Players can have more narrative traits than success traits. If you have 6 players and an hour to play in, you're not going to burn 60 successes in an hour. That's a success a minute. You will want to reduce them to maybe 3 successes per player without failure, so that you can share screen time around between them accordingly in the playtime you have available.
So let's talk more deeply about wrenching the system around to work with your resources of time and players next time. Thanks for falling through the cracks with us.